Hey, Parth, good to see you.
Keith, great to see you and in person this time.
Absolutely. Welcome to Inside Pharma Leadership. We are speaking live from Ep12, and Parth and I had the opportunity to be here together. So really excited to be able to talk with you and continue our conversation from the last time. And before we started, one of the things I was referencing as we prepared, that I had created a clone. And the clone has background information about me and those type of things. And so from the last podcast, I put in information and asked, what are some of the questions that we should be asking during our conversation. So as we talked a little bit about some of the questions, you were pretty impressed. And it's the beauty of AI, because I didn't have to sort through and look through all of the information to figure out what it is we needed to talk about, or even go back through and listen to the entire podcast. So here we are. Again, welcome to the show, and really excited to have this conversation.
Keith, thank you. And thanks to all the listeners joining us for part 2. So exciting. And I love that story, Keith. It just shows the world that we're now in. What almost rolled off my tongue is the world that we're entering. But we're here. It's here now, and it's percolated in so many ways in our lives. AI has percolated in so many ways. And what a beautiful example of you living and embracing this AI first mindset. And a lot of the conversations we're having right now, as we talked about for our listeners that are jumping in for the second part, we talked about in the first part, this whole notion of future of work. What will that look like? And everyone's trying to parse out, what is the role of human cognition and intelligence going to be? And what is that periphery where AI takes over, and how much of the complementarity that exists, assuming you have embraced this notion of human centricity. And you're living that. That's amazing.
I still feel like I'm falling behind, but it's a constant focus on trying to learn. It brings me to a question, because I know one of the things that I've been talking to people or other trainers about is, how is the role going to evolve? Or some people feel like that their role is going to disappear. And what my observations have been twofold. A lot of trainers are so busy that they don't have enough time to be able to incorporate AI. So figuring out even how to use it has become difficult because the work is still there. B, focusing on developing that skill is maybe the more important thing, because if you don't know how to use AI correctly, or even use AI at all, ultimately you're going to be left behind. And that's really the important thing that I see from a trainer perspective. Give me your thoughts on that.
It's such an important question to be asking right now. And just before getting into the nuts and bolts and my points of view on that, Keith, we're all feeling them. Let's just lean into that feeling that, hey, this is a treadmill that seems to be going faster the minute we catch our breath. And I would just tell everyone, from my point of view, it's okay. What we are experiencing is this exponential rate of innovation, and it's going to get faster from here. So the key is focus on, the old Stoic principles. You focus on what you can control, and just experience the journey, so to speak. Coming back to your question in terms of what role will learning play, and how should trainers think about it? There's very important and interesting concept in terms of AI intelligence. When we study the intelligence of these models, they follow something that a lot of folks in the space, researchers are calling jagged nature of intelligence. And what I mean by that is, have you ever experienced that your ChatGPT or LLM is very smart and dumb at the same time?
Yes.
Right? It's like,
right, yeah.
And here's this thing that is so powerful, but sometimes it just misses such basic stuff. For example, not too far back out in time, it couldn't count the number of R's in strawberry. And
interesting.
And it's just how the behind the scenes, these are probabilistic models, and how they're parsing language out to generate responses, and then we layer reasoning capabilities on top. So that's a great example of jagged nature of intelligence, where it's not a uniform, cohesive, spherical expansion of intelligence. it follows a jagged nature. So think of a cracked glass, right? So it'll be very good in some things, and then there's some blockers because model capabilities are limited. And then what researchers are calling is reverse salient capabilities. So things that are those blockers that are preventing certain types of capabilities, like the ability for model to count number of R's in strawberry.
Okay.
So then what these labs are going to continue figuring out is unlocking those reverse salient components which are blocking it. So two things that we need to keep in mind in the short term, understanding that is jagged nature of intelligence, and then there's how humans need the role that they play today is going to be continue to fill those gaps. So that's premise one. Premise two is we need to think out into the future and prepare for a world where the models will continue getting more and more important, more intelligent, and even in a world where there's theoretical 99.99% intelligence compared to a human, let's say, and it's just a thought experiment. So if you're for the doomerism, the doomers out there, hang tight. I'm about to make a point here. Even in that theoretical max intelligence world, where the model intelligence supersedes or is very close to human cognition, dare I say, even in that world, there's a very important role that humans will play. And we did these roundtables where we went to 9 cities, spoke to over 100 leaders, consulted a lot of folks that are in these labs working on these models directly. And the point of view that really does get distilled down is there's some areas that humans will continue having that the unique ownership, and that is judgment, accountability, and desire. The notion of, hey, I need to improve something, the spontaneity of innovation and imagination that comes from a very deep-rooted human place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are some grounding perspectives, Keith. As a practical matter, what does that mean for the near term for our trainers that are running a class next week? They're probably not philosophizing in modern day Socrates. For them, really leaning in on that judgment and human connection part, where we think that accountability, judgment, human connection, as I said, those are areas that we will do a great job. Human cognition is great for it, and we will continue doing that. So as a practical matter, think of a sales rep who has a very nice brief prepared for them using an empathetic agent that was able to go through all the CRM data, put it together, and based on the trainings, based on the CRM information, stitch together, hey, for your meeting with Dr. Williams, here's what I recommend you focus on. Now, where judgment comes into play is the human still needs to look at it and say, based on everything that I know intuitively about Dr. Williams, is this message likely going to resonate? And then showing up empathetically and sympathetically, delivering the message based on what does their practice look like? Who are the patients that they're seeing? AI can tell me that there's a patient with stage 3 breast cancer that this HCP is treating, but as a human, I know in the fiber of my being what that feels like. I know how busy this oncologist's practice is. I know by looking at their facial expressions how to deliver the message in a place where they have receptivity. So on these, I think where we need to move how we train people is beyond just declarative knowledge and into this world of judgment, human connection, and accountability, which will unpack it.
Right, absolutely. So a lot to unpack there. So first of all, when I think about, you talk about the jagged edge, I think about the fact that AI is not good with dates. If you have a conversation and you go over the weekend, you follow up, it always gets the dates wrong. So to your point, there's this jagged edge because in some ways it seems so smart.
Yeah.
Other ways, it's just like you can't remember what day it is. I think that's number one. One of the things that Dr. Keith Keating talked about earlier this morning during his presentation was the fact that when we think about knowledge in essence is currency, and we talk about it, everybody has that knowledge. So no longer can you go in and it just be knowledge. I'm a big Jeremy Miner fan. He's a sales guru. And one of the things he talks about is the fact that two sales representatives can go in, have the same message, have the same information. One representative does so much better than the other one. That will still exist even with AI, because ultimately you can have two representatives that are competing, generally have the same level of knowledge, the same level of information, but their ability to be able to convey that message to the physician in a way where it emotionally hits that physician to get to right, or any healthcare professional, that's going to be the difference, and that's the importance of being very human.
I love that, Keith. And it's in so many ways, over the last few years, we have been on this trajectory and path we talked about value creation, that we want sales reps and MSLs to show up in front of providers as value creators, adding something more to the equation. And this is now accelerated that multiple folds. And it's, to your point, when knowledge as a currency gets commoditized, i.e., it's more universally, easily accessible, that asymmetry gets closed, what else do you bring to the table? And we know that knowledge is a means, it's an input, not the output.
Absolutely.
So the question that begs is, can we train our people to take that raw material of knowledge and process it for the healthcare providers so they can apply to their practice, because they're still very busy. And now they have the extra pressure of, there was Dr. Google, now there's Dr. ChatGPT right. and Perplexity and Claude, and it's making their lives harder, not easier. So that's a great point around knowledge as a currency that gets more pervasively available. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk with us a little bit about, I know that ACTO just rolled out these AI agents. And I know one of the things that we talked about last time were them being very role specific. Talk a little bit why that's so important and how ACTO is going about making sure that happens and what that looks like.
Yeah, role specificity from the lens of agentic AI is super, super critical. And I'll speak to all the builders and scalers out there that are looking to either bring a technology, agentic AI technology, into the organization today, into a life sciences company, or scale it. We studied very closely, Keith, across 9 different cities through those roundtables, as I've mentioned. We spoke to over 100 leaders that were at the forefront of AI in life sciences, and we talked about the good, the bad, the ugly. And the reality is, still, most AI pilots are on life support if they're not already in a graveyard. And that begs a question, because there's a collective learning opportunity there. It begs a question, okay, why, when the technology, going back to the jagged nature, the tech is getting better, but we're almost stagnant in terms of adoption and rolling that out and making it be a part of the fabric. There's one very clear standout principle that came out, and it's actually a universally governing equation around what makes AI successful in life sciences, which is trust equals compliant plus capable. So what I mean by that is, we talked about knowledge as a currency. There's another currency from the tech side that makes a technology like AI that is which becomes so integral to our work successful, and that is, do I trust it? So then where does the trust come from? Trust comes from 2 places: if it's compliant and capable. And what I mean by that is, if you have an AI agent that is highly compliant but not capable, i.e., I ask it to do something, or I query it, and it always says, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. And after the second or third time, you're going to say, I'm not going back in because it's useless and a waste of time.
Yeah.
Conversely, think of an AI agent that's always like, yes, boss, I got you. And it goes and it performs the action or gets you the answer, but it's fast and loose and compliant. We've all heard horror stories about these lawyers that cited cases that didn't exist, and the judge grilled them. Good luck renewing your bar license. And that's a great example of capable but not compliant, and you don't trust it. So trust is it's a permutation of compliant and capable. Now, here's another very important thing, Keith, and very powerful insight that we had. If you think about the commercialization journey, so from the time that we get our PDUFA date and all engines kick in, so you have upstream commercialization where a lot of the upstream marketing work gets done around messaging, positioning, identifying the customers, engaging KOLs, so on and so forth. And then you have downstream marketing where our field teams come in, engaging payers, providers, patients. What's interesting is what means to be compliant, it's not monolithic. It changes and evolves depending on the position that you take on that commercialization spectrum. I like to say it's like we're all like Schrodinger's cat.
Right, yeah.
You can't, you can't know the position and the direction at the same time. So if I am in HQ, what compliance means to me is an agent that helps me and the responses are in accordance with the label, the claims, and MLR, something MLR can get behind. So the provenance becomes important. But more I get closer to the front lines, compliance means consistency and being within the guardrails that are set. And therefore, because what it means to be compliant and capable changes with role, you can't build a trustworthy agentic AI system unless the agent understands who is the role I'm serving. And what has been very fascinating and somewhat concerning as well at the same time, when a lot of senior leaders, CIOs, and organizations brought in enterprise-wide agentic AI capabilities, or they did these mass licenses with the model providers, they came out and said, so-and-so top 20 pharma company is now partnered with, Anthropic or OpenAI or Microsoft. Everyone can build agents. What that created was this arms race to, everyone got a hammer now, and they started looking for nails. And everyone started building these workflow agents, which completely were context deprived of this role-based construct. So you have the swarm of workflow agents, bots just doing stuff without a cohesive strategy and without an understanding of who's the human that they're serving. So that's where we saw a big problem, and we, given our immersion in industry, we're like, we got to solve this. So that's where we launched role-based super agents that can orchestrate work for specific humans, human roles, and give people more agency.
Okay, that makes sense. So a couple of things. One of the words I think of is expectations. And the reason I say that is that when we think of a human, we expect that we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be a compliance issue. It's why we would have compliance rights, why there's training. There are all of these things. I think in terms of these remote cars, for example, if a car has an accident, it's a big deal, even though the car will have less accidents and cause less human deaths than humans driving on a regular basis. So we hold AI to a higher standard than we do humans. The other part of that is I find that because of people have, I say unrealistic expectations, because first of all, AI gets its context from us. And because it gets its context from us, some of that context can be incorrect. And so when people don't necessarily understand things like hallucinations and things like that, there are ways that you can either write a prompt or do things within a prompt that get you a better result. It's not to say that there won't be hallucinations and those type of things. It's just that when you expect them, you know where and how to look for them. And so it becomes less of a problem. It's just something that it's AI, it's how you work with it. It's just like you have a trait as a human being and you just say, hey, that's Parth, that's how Parth does. We just need, this is the outcome we're trying to get to. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because it's just a thought I had just around this expectation piece about what AI can do.
Yeah, first step, keep going back to what we were talking about, is imbuing and embedding those expectations within the agent by giving it more context around what's the role. So we talked about hallucination as an example. If you are an MSL preparing for a scientific exchange versus a sales rep, that varies very differently. What do you do with that underlying data, which is the clinical papers? Coming back, where we think that there's another very important risk mitigator is by testing the agents and building observability into the agents so you can monitor how the agent performance is. Here's a very interesting thing that came up in our conversations. When you sit across the table from your chief legal officer or head of medical legal, they'll tell you that we're not looking for zero risk because in the real world, zero risk just doesn't exist.
Exactly.
There's a lot of risk in our human-dominated world today where I can train my sales reps up the wazoo. The reality is when they're in front of the HCP, they're prone to cognitive biases, cognitive lapses, misremembering information, so on and so forth. But we basically accepted a standard that, hey, if someone performs 90% on their knowledge assessment, on a balance of probability, that's an acceptable level of risk, and we're okay with that. So what we're saying is, now that we've accepted the premise of a role-based construct for these agentic AI systems, let's bring in the same testing and observability being able to observe what the agent is doing. A lot of in that part of that workflow arms race, what happened was people just built and deployed agents, and there was low adoption that came back. Going back to the trust piece, we couldn't tell if they were capable or not because they were operating in a black box.
Okay.
So how do you take them out of the black box and put them in a glass box so you can pinpoint and you can say, hey, what is the information that's being delivered? Is that within our risk guideline guardrails? And on a balance, if we continuously test it, is it giving us a reasonable response rate with the added overlay of the human oversight, which is an important case that trainers still need to make. Hey, we can have all this AI that we want, but the judgment and accountability still remains with the human. So that's why it's even more important that we're training people to be able to inspect and prove the work that agents are doing.
Okay. So from a learning and development standpoint, then it would make sense that L&D teams think about flow as far as retesting, work sessions for the lack of a better term, because in essence, the only way that you can track to make sure the agents are doing what they need to do is, in a sense, set up some type of coaching feedback type of loop, as well as testing from we have POAs, those type of things that training teams, marketing teams are responsible for oftentimes. So would that be something that would make sense for L&D leaders to think about?
Absolutely. And I think L&D leaders are extremely well positioned to raise their hand and say, because actually taking a step back, Keith, this infrastructure doesn't exist in organizations today. We're all figuring it out in real time. So it's an opportunity for L&D leaders to raise their hand and say, hey, by the way, we are so close to subject matter expertise. L&D is like this toll booth of commercial and medical execution, right? Everything comes in here and then gets dispersed out into the field and front lines. So we're well positioned for subject matter expertise. We already have the centralization and ears, hearts, and minds of the humans on the front lines. And guess what? We also have frameworks in place. We've tested the humans. We can drive testing and certification for agents, so we can all collectively have more peace of mind what is being said. So it's in tech we call them golden data sets.
Okay.
There's no one better positioned to build a golden data set than someone in learning and development. And where we talk a lot about AI literacy for humans. A other side of the coin of that, which is a massive untapped opportunity for L&D leaders, is certification and testing and governance for agents.
So that's definitely something new. At some point, I guess, what would that look like, or how would you set that up? I mean, when I think about some of the trainers that I've talked to, they're already stretched. They don't feel like they have enough time. And one of the breakouts, they're talking about an army of one. And there are a lot of people sitting in the room that were army of one. I can't imagine them taking that on. What does that look like, and what are some strategies that training teams may use to become more effective, as well as selling that?
Yeah, I think the opportunity right now is when senior leadership is saying, "Go figure out AI." Um, there's two pathways L&D can take. L&D can be the final, again, play a support function, which is, hey, we'll do AI training. And I think that's missing the opportunity here to elevate L&D as a strategic function. And how it becomes a strategic function is, if you think about what's keeping your CEO up at night, what's keeping your CEO up at night is we're on a good path for figuring out our AI strategy on the R&D side, and the pipeline's going to get bigger, either through acquisitions or as these AI discovered drugs start coming to the market. With that blown up pipe and limited human capital, how do we commercialize these products? And then the obvious next answer to that, Keith, is, well, agentic AI is great. It's promising it has all these promised benefits, which are true on a small scale. And now we're trying to figure out how do we scale that out. Now, what is the biggest scale limiter? Going back to what we were talking about, is trust. Now, how do we close the gap on trust is with compliance and governance, and which is one functional area in the company that can really rise to the occasion. It's L&D. So look, we're always going to be an army of one unless we go out there and advocate for ourselves and rise to the occasion as a strategic functional area. Money flows where the problem, where attention goes and where the problem resides, right? So if we're solving the problem of governance around agentic AI, there's budgets for there. I can promise you there's budgets for that.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that L&D has to be more creative. We're still thinking about 10 years ago. I was looking at some trends, and more companies are starting to identify people that are it's an AI role. That's their role. That's their responsibility. And L&D needs to be thinking from that perspective, not just bringing somebody in to do training, but specifically your expertise is just around this AI piece. And then that will flow down to the rest of the organization.
Keith, if I may build on that as well. And if we think about the efficiencies that are being locked in on the tactical execution on L&D, for example, we built some agents into our platform where course creation used to take days can now be done in a fraction of the time. Same thing with quiz creation, creating workshops, etc. So there's all this efficiency that's happening, and I'm really not discounting everything that's on the plate for our friends in L&D. It's also because in the company everything's a training problem always, right? So the roadmap's always full. I do think at the same time there's an opportunity for us to proactively go and say, hey, not only are we driving efficiency here, but we can help the organization be more effective through better governance. And we have a voice around the governance because we've tested the humans all these years. Now we're well positioned to test the agents. So to go back to one of your specific questions as well, Keith, is what does that look like in the real life? And it's actually, if the agentic system is designed well, it's not a highly arduous and time-consuming process. You create a set of benchmark questions that are maybe things that you've heard from the field, what you expect, what are basically FAQs of sorts. And you create an Excel sheet of, these are all the questions, and then you go to a subject matter expert. So for example, what are the top 10 questions that MSLs are likely to ask based on this new clinical paper? And then you have a subject matter expert, someone in your medical team or med ed team, go fill out those answers how a human would. And those answers are part of your compliant messaging, so on and so forth. And then you feed that to the agent. Let the agent answer that, and you can measure what is the accuracy rate, what is the cognitive drift. And again, I like to say trust in agentic AI is not a spontaneous emergent property. It won't just happen. It needs to be designed and engineered in. And if you're finding a lot of cognitive drift or hallucination, going back to your point, Keith, then you're going to flag that out to your MedOps, ComOps, or ComIT team that is sponsoring this agentic system, or there are at least stakeholders in that. Based on everything that we've talked and heard in the space, that is a very welcome message to be able to help mitigate that risk.
So, Parth, what I hear you saying is that ultimately AI is a tool. You can't just roll it out there and expect that it's going to be perfect. You have to work with it to get the messaging, to get all of the things that you want for it to work correctly.
Absolutely. And there's certain parts of it that need to be designed and engineered into the system itself. And then there are certain things that happen after the system is built and engineered. So we talked about designing it with a role-based lens as being something that gets done during the build or design phase. Now, what happens beyond that, part of that is AI training and literacy. But the interesting thing, Keith, is if your agent is hallucinating, it's not compliant, or it has limited capabilities, and people are aversive of it, not kind of trusting it, you can train them how to prompt it all day long. It's not going to change the systemic issue. Where I think L&D, going back to our previous discussion, can play a very serious role, critical role here, is helping identify what those risks and gaps are so you can fix how the agent was designed and reprompt it, so to speak.
Okay. Talk a little bit about some case studies. I know you've had an opportunity to work with a lot of companies, and I'm sure you've seen some great successes that people will want to hear about.
Yeah, there's two very, very powerful case studies, Keith. One is on the commercial side with sales team. We just published one with Curax Pharma. It was a wild success. And the problem that we were trying to solve there is how do you get critical knowledge in the hands of field sales reps when they need it? So when they're about to go interface with healthcare professionals, and the problem today is that that critical knowledge resides across many different systems of record. So to design an empathetic role-based super agent that can go navigate different systems of records, pull that information, stitch it, and then give a compliant answer. That's what we built for Curax, and the results have been phenomenal. The net promoter score in some instances were over 9 on 10.
Wow.
The reason why I bring net promoter score is there's no bigger endorsement of trust than for a human to say, hey, I'll tell my friends about this.
Absolutely.
So I know a lot of folks are also trying to figure out what is the ROI story behind AI products that we're rolling out. I think NPS is a very important KPI, and it is one of the strongest leading indicators that we found, where you'll have activity and adoption, which is great. I can use an agent once a day and have a lot of impact. So activity doesn't really capture how the field is feeling about it and the amount of trust that they have. We think that net promoter score is very, very powerful. And then we did another very exciting project for one of the top 20 pharma companies for their MSLs. So a role-based super agent for MSLs. And this super agent is capable of everything from retrieving critical knowledge across different systems of record, pre-call planning, CRM logging, so the KIQs that come up in their conversations with HCPs and KOLs, it goes and logs it in the CRM, and also coaching. So helping managers prepare for coaching conversations with MSLs.
Okay, great. Well, Parth, time has flown as usual.
As always.
Any other closing comments before we end here?
My guidance to those thinking about agentic AI in their organizations would be think workforce, not workflows, to build a bot that does one thing, and having a swarm of single trick ponies that gets you cool demos to share leadership, but it doesn't get impact. A more powerful approach is to look at a role and identify what are the parts of that role where that human might be struggling with, and designing role-based empathetic agent systems that are capable of performing many different things and understand the human. So imbuing that human centricity is what I would encourage. And final closing thoughts as last time around as well. I just think this is an extremely valuable and powerful moment for folks in L&D. We're all trying to figure out in the organization what is the future of work in this agentic era will be. And L&D has an opportunity to raise their hands and say, hey, we'll help with governance and compliance, which is one of the most critical components of getting agents at scale.
Parth, thank you again. Great conversation.
Thank you. Keith, always a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.